Is Nigeria's Ethnic Balancing Act under threat? A deep dive into Tinubu's appointments and the future of national cohesion. Welcome to the Bold African Voice, BAV, where Africa speaks boldly and truth echoes loudest. I'm Abdul Karim Kargbo, born and raised in Africa. Today, we take you to the heart of Nigeria's democracy, where a storm is brewing over ethnic representation, presidential appointments, and the fragile unity of Africa's most populous nation. Is President Bola Tinubu reshaping Nigeria's federal balance or eroding it? Stay with us as we uncover the facts, draw continental comparisons, and ask, is Nigeria's unity at risk? Nigeria's diverse ethno-religious makeup has long necessitated a delicate balancing act in governance, an unspoken rule that top political appointments should reflect the country's pluralistic identity. Since independence, and especially after the return to democracy in 1999, Nigerian presidents have adhered, at least in appearance, to a system of ethnic and regional inclusiveness. However, under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, criticism is mounting that this informal convention is unraveling, with serious implications for national unity, democratic trust, and political stability. The Constitution versus Convention, a tenuous equilibrium. Nigeria's 1999 Constitution mandates that federal appointments must reflect the federal character of the country. Specifically, Section 14 Tau 3 of the Constitution stipulates that the composition of the government of the Federation or any of its agencies shall be carried out in such a manner as to reflect the federal character, to promote national unity, and also to command national loyalty. Yet beyond the letter of the law lies a broader political understanding. To preserve peace in a deeply divided country, home to over 250 ethnic groups, with Hausa Fulani, Yoruba, and Igbo being the three dominant blocs, presidents have generally ensured a geographical and religious spread in their cabinet and security appointments. This informal balance has acted as a glue holding together Nigeria's fragile post-Civil War political architecture. Tinubu's appointments, a breach or continuation of a trend. As of April 2025, all 8 of Nigeria's most sensitive federal positions, including the central bank, NNPC, police, army, customs, intelligence, EFCC, and revenue service, are held by ethnic Yorubas, BBC News 2024. These are not just symbolic roles, they control Nigeria's security, financial system, and anti-corruption apparatus. This marks a stark departure from previous administrations. Goodluck Jonathan, 2010-2015, maintained ethnic diversity with appointees from Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, Calabar, Atiap, and Fulani backgrounds. Muhammadu Buhari, 2015-2023, leaned heavily towards the north with appointees from Hausa, Kanuri, and Nupe groups, but not from a single ethnic bloc. While Buhari was accused of northern favoritism, Tinubu's consolidation of power in Yoruba hands appears even more pronounced and unprecedented, a fracturing federation. The North reacts. The reaction from the North has been particularly intense. The replacement of key Northerners, including Abdul Rashid Bawa, former EFCC head, and Mele Kyari, NNPC boss, with Yoruba appointees, has deepened regional grievances. Bawa's arrest and prolonged detention raised further concerns of political persecution masquerading as anti-corruption efforts, BBC News 2024. Even within Tinubu's ruling All Progressives Congress, APC, discontent is bubbling. Senator Ali Ndoum, a northern APC lawmaker, publicly criticized Tinubu's appointments as non-inclusive and misaligned with the Renewed Hope campaign that promised national unity. Attempts by presidential aides to defend the administration, including a now-deleted post by media aide Sunday Dare, claiming 71 Northerners had been appointed, only worsened perceptions of opacity and imbalance. Africa-wide perspective, How other plural societies manage diversity. Nigeria is not alone in managing diversity through political appointments. Several African nations have evolved unique models. Kenya, the 2010 constitution, mandates ethnic inclusion in public appointments. However, successive governments have faced criticism for Kikuyu or Kalenjin dominance. South Africa, post-apartheid governments have pursued racial and ethnic inclusivity as a cornerstone of the African National Congress (ANC) governance philosophy. Yet, critiques of Zulu favoritism under Jacob Zuma mirrored the ethnic concentration concerns now seen in Nigeria. Ethiopia, the federal arrangement built around ethnic regions has led to periodic power struggles and armed conflict, underscoring how mishandling ethnic representation can lead to state fragility. In this comparative light, Nigeria's informal power-sharing tradition, though imperfect, has thus far helped avoid large-scale ethnic insurgencies or secessionist wars post-Civil War. Its erosion now, as critics argue, could unleash a dangerous precedent. Implications for democracy and nationhood. The symbolic and practical weight of Tinubu's appointments cannot be overstated. In a country where the government is often seen as the primary channel for wealth and influence, representation becomes existential. As Professor Tijani Nania warned, the precedent being set may encourage future presidents to indulge in similar ethnic stacking, threatening the very concept of national belonging. If Nigerians no longer see themselves reflected in the face of government, political apathy, unrest, and even disintegration are not far-fetched scenarios. Already, agitations for Biafran secession in the southeast and calls for restructuring in the southwest are rooted in long-standing grievances about exclusion and marginalization. A forward-looking approach, the need for institutionalized equity. To prevent further erosion of national cohesion, Nigeria may need to go beyond conventions. Several steps could be taken. 1. Codify ethnic balancing in key appointments. While the federal character principle exists, more explicit thresholds could be mandated for top security and financial roles. 2. Public disclosure and transparency. Real-time public dashboards showing the ethnic, gender, and regional breakdown of federal appointees could encourage accountability. 3. Judicial oversight. Strengthen the powers of the Federal Character Commission to review and veto appointments that violate inclusion principles. 4. Empower civil society. Let civil society and academic watchdogs regularly audit appointments and publish ethnic equity scorecards. 5. Invest in civic nationalism. While ethnic identity remains strong, the government can foster civic nationalism through inclusive education, shared public services, and symbolic representation, e.g., national honors and days. The role of civil society and public discourse. In any thriving democracy, civil society acts as the moral compass and conscience of the nation. In Nigeria, however, the response of civil society to President Tinubu's appointments has been mixed, divided largely along regional and political lines. Groups like the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, CRAP, and the Center for Democracy and Development, CDD, have raised concerns about the implications of lopsided appointments on national integration and public trust. According to a recent CDD report, 2024, the consolidation of strategic government positions within a single ethnic identity not only endangers pluralism, but also undermines the democratic ethos of representation. Prominent religious and ethnic organizations have also weighed in. The Christian Association of Nigeria, CAN, and the Northern Elders Forum, NEF, have expressed fears that the appointments do not reflect the religious and regional heterogeneity of the Nigerian Federation. In a public statement, NEF declared that, if appointments continue on this trajectory, the idea of a united Nigeria will become difficult to sell to our youth. In contrast, Several Yoruba socio-cultural groups, including the Afenifere Renewal Group, have defended Tinubu's choices as merit-based, arguing that critics are politicizing ethnicity to sow division. However, the louder these voices grow, the more polarized the discourse becomes, shifting attention from policy substance to identity politics. Economic consequences of perceived exclusion. Perception, in politics and economics, is often as influential as reality. The sense of exclusion among key regional populations, particularly the Hausa Fulani in the north and the Igbo in the southeast, has economic consequences that go beyond governance optics. In regions feeling marginalized, investment confidence declines. Northerners who perceive federal neglect may be less likely to cooperate with central economic programs, such as agricultural subsidies or infrastructure rollouts. Southeastern states, long aggrieved over structural marginalization, could further detach from federal initiatives, hampering national development goals. A 2023 report by the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG, warned that regional inequality and exclusionary governance create asymmetric economic performance across zones, leading to labor migration, insecurity, and erosion of trust in national institutions. Moreover, international investors closely watch Nigeria's ethnic stability. In their April 2024 country outlook, Moody's Investors Service flagged the potential for increased subnational friction stemming from perceived ethnically skewed governance as a medium-term risk to Nigeria's political risk profile. The EFCC controversy, where a northern appointee was swiftly removed under allegations and replaced by a southerner, has been cited by business chambers as evidence of politicized anti-corruption enforcement. If businesses perceive regulatory bodies as biased, capital flight and tax evasion could increase. From federal character to national character, is a post-ethnic Nigeria possible? The persistent ethnic lens through which Nigerians view appointments reveals a deeper malaise. The ideal of a post-ethnic Nigerian identity remains elusive, trapped between elite manipulation of identity politics and the absence of a unifying civic ideology. To achieve such a national character, institutional reforms must go hand in hand with generational reorientation, curriculum reform, introduce civics, and national identity studies in schools, emphasizing unity over ethnicity. Quota reviews, revisit federal character guidelines to emphasize regional equity without compromising on merit. Youth inclusion, empower young Nigerians through national service and innovation hubs that promote interregional collaboration. National symbols and language, invest in shared national rituals and consider adopting a neutral lingua franca, such as Pidgin English, as a unifying language in public broadcasting and military drills. As Professor Jibrin Ibrahim, a leading political scientist at the Center for Democracy and Development, observed, Nigeria's ethnic preoccupations will fade only when power becomes less about survival and more about service. The problem is not ethnicity itself, it is the instrumentalization of ethnicity by elites who fear meritocracy. Judicial checks and institutional safeguards, do they exist? Nigeria's Federal Character Commission, FCC, is the primary institution tasked with overseeing equitable representation in federal appointments. Yet, its impact remains minimal. The Commission has not, as of April 2025, released a formal review of the current administration's appointments, despite mounting public pressure. Critics argue the FCC has been compromised or politically subdued. Former FCC chairman, Professor Shuaib Oba Abdul Rahim, in a 2022 interview, lamented that the Commission lacks teeth to bite. When the executive chooses to bypass balance, there is little we can do except raise alarm. To regain credibility, the FCC must be restructured to function as an independent commission akin to the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, with clear reporting obligations to the National Assembly and legal authority to block non-compliant appointments. In addition, the Nigerian Bar Association, NBA, and civil society litigators can challenge ethnically skewed appointments in court. In 2020, for instance, the courts ruled against the exclusion of certain zones in police promotions. A repeat of such judicial activism could compel the presidency to tread more cautiously. Political implications: what lies ahead for 2027 and beyond? The political reverberations of Tinubu's appointments may have lasting consequences as Nigeria gears toward the 2027 general elections. Already, opposition parties, such as the People's Democratic Party, PDP, and the Labour Party, are leveraging these grievances to rebuild support in the North and Southeast. Analysts foresee a resurgence of regional political blocs, potentially reviving older agitation for restructuring or rotational presidency. The idea of zoning, an informal agreement for rotating the presidency between the North and South, could be back on the table. Meanwhile, internal discontent within the APC threatens to fracture the party. Figures like Senator Ndum and Governor Abdullahi Sule have hinted at potential realignments if inclusiveness is not restored. A growing body of youth-led political movements, inspired by Taugar Ensars and disillusioned by ethnic favoritism, may catalyze a shift toward issue-based politics, creating a new axis in Nigeria's electoral equation. The voices from the ground, feelings of marginalization, and civic responses. Beyond elite political circles and policy analysts, it is the everyday Nigerian who most viscerally feels the effects of exclusion. Interviews and grassroots surveys conducted by media outlets such as Channels TV, Daily Trust, and the BBC Hausa Service reveal growing disenchantment among citizens, particularly in Nigeria's northern and southeastern regions. In Kano, one of the most politically active northern states, civil society groups such as the Arewa Youth Consultative Forum have accused the Tinubu administration of treating the North as a mere vote bank. In interviews with Hausa-speaking residents, there's a shared sentiment that federal appointments now seem tailored for loyalty and kinship rather than balanced competence. In the Southeast, which has not held the presidency since Nigeria's independence, the feeling of being structurally marginalized has deepened. The Ohanaeze Ndigbo, the Apex Igbo socio-political group, issued a statement in March 2025 describing the lopsided appointments as a continuation of systemic injustice. Their Secretary General warned that unless Nigeria restructures to give all groups equal standing, secessionist voices will only grow louder. Even among the Middle Belt states, often caught between northern and southern political maneuvers, citizens feel left out of key national decisions. Youth-led organizations in Benue and Plateau states have called for a redefinition of federal character to ensure equitable development and representation. While these grievances have not yet translated into widespread protest, the underlying volatility is palpable, especially in regions already plagued by insecurity and economic marginalization. Ethnic representation and national security, a fragile link. One of the most critical areas affected by ethnic exclusion is national security, where trust in state institutions is paramount. Nigeria continues to face multiple security crises: Boko Haram insurgency in the northeast, banditry in the northwest, IPOB-related separatist violence in the southeast, and farmer-herder clashes in the Middle Belt. Security experts, including retired General Martin Agwai, argue that national cohesion is essential for intelligence sharing and operational effectiveness. In his 2024 speech at the National Defense College, Agwai stated, "A country where entire regions feel alienated from the command structure of the military will suffer not just morale issues, but poor intelligence and weak civilian cooperation. Counterterrorism requires trust in the leadership of the state. Indeed, ethnic perceptions affect deployment strategies. For instance, when security operatives from one region are deployed to crisis zones dominated by another group, local suspicion often hampers cooperation. The removal of non-Yoruba heads of the EFCC and customs, agencies critical to national and border security, has sparked concerns over the professional neutrality of such institutions. In a leaked memo reviewed by the Cable Nigeria, mid-ranking army officers expressed unease that a perceived southern tilt in defense-related appointments might affect esprit de corps and interregional trust. If the pattern persists, Nigeria risks reproducing the mistakes of its past, when ethnic domination of the military hierarchy was a major driver of coups and unrest. As security becomes increasingly decentralized through vigilante groups and regional defense outfits like Amotekun in the southwest and Hisbah in the north, lack of inclusive federal leadership could push regions to act autonomously, undermining state authority. Comparative federalism, what Nigeria can learn from other diverse nations. While Nigeria's challenges are unique, its dilemmas are not. Other ethnically and linguistically diverse federations have navigated similar tensions with varying degrees of success. Looking outward provides a blueprint for how Nigeria might institutionalize inclusion without descending into tokenism or paralysis. India, diversity through bureaucratic engineering. India, with its 1.4 billion people and dozens of major languages and religions, has historically relied on public service quotas and administrative zones to ensure representation. The Indian Administrative Service, IAS, recruits from all states, and federal appointments are geographically distributed through a constitutionally backed cadre system. More importantly, India's Supreme Court routinely checks executive excess, and public interest litigations, PILs, on appointments are common. Nigeria could empower its judiciary and public service commissions to play a similar gatekeeping role in appointment fairness. Canada, provincial federalism and francophone sensitivity. Canada's bilingual and multicultural federation offers lessons in how cultural recognition and provincial autonomy can reduce national tensions. Quebec's French-speaking population has been historically accommodated through linguistic protections, provincial jurisdiction, and representation in federal ministries. Nigeria's idea of restructuring could borrow from Canada's decentralization, allowing zones greater control over economic policy, education, and even some aspects of policing, while maintaining unity through national coordination. Switzerland, rotating presidency, and multilingual governance. In Switzerland, the presidency rotates annually among members of the Federal Council, which is composed of representatives from the country's major linguistic and regional groups. No single ethnic or linguistic group dominates decision-making. While Nigeria's population size makes a rotating presidency impractical, multi-regional executive councils or shared presidency structures, e.g., mandatory vice presidency from another region, could ensure symbolic balance. Towards a more inclusive Nigeria, building the institutions of belonging. At the heart of Nigeria's tension is the question of belonging. For the country to survive as a single, cohesive entity, it must create institutions that reflect the shared ownership of the state. Key recommendations for institutional reform include 1. Revamp the Federal Character Commission with real legal authority, transparent metrics, and public reporting obligations. 2. Strengthen the judiciary's oversight role over appointments that violate representation norms. 3. Mandate regional equity impact assessments before announcing key federal appointments. 4. Create inclusive economic councils that distribute national resources with visibility and fairness. 5. Foster interregional leadership academies to train future leaders in pluralistic governance. As political scientist Dr. Aisha Osori argued in her 2025 keynote at the Center for Public Policy Alternatives, Until Nigerians feel seen and respected by the state, democracy will remain a contest of identities rather than ideas. The role of the media, amplifying division or enabling dialogue. In Nigeria's politically charged environment, the media wields immense influence, not only in shaping public perception, but also in either fostering inclusiveness or deepening ethnic mistrust. The media, in its diverse forms, radio, television, print, and especially digital platforms, has historically been both a mirror and a megaphone for ethnic narratives. Traditional media outlets such as Channels TV, The Guardian Nigeria, and Daily Trust have attempted to provide balanced coverage of federal appointments and their implications. Yet, their efforts are often undercut by regionalized editorial biases and sensationalist reporting from fringe outlets. Northern based publications, for instance, have highlighted the perceived marginalization of Hausa Fulani officials, while Southwestern media, aligned with the Yoruba elite, have tended to frame Tinubu's appointments as a meritocratic departure from past quota politics. Even more potent is the impact of social media platforms like X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and WhatsApp. Here, narratives move fast, and often facts are an afterthought. Hashtags such as Yoruba Republic, North Excluded, and Tinubu appointments have trended nationally at various points since 2023, fueling divisive rhetoric. Viral posts frequently exaggerate statistics or misattribute motives, inflaming public anger. At the same time, social media has opened a space for alternative voices, particularly youth, women, and civil society leaders, to call for a more inclusive, civic based national identity. Initiatives like You One Nigeria, We're All Nigerians, and Merit with Equity represent counter narratives, advocating for governance built on both fairness and competence. Media experts like Kadaria Ahmed have warned that unless the media sector is reformed to prioritize national cohesion, it risks becoming a tool for elite driven ethno political manipulation. She noted in her 2024 TEDx Abuja talk: the Nigerian media must evolve beyond ethnic outrage cycles. We must interrogate power without inflaming prejudice, and we must report imbalances without reinforcing stereotypes. Going forward, a stronger media code of conduct, increased funding for investigative journalism, and partnerships with fact checking organizations could reduce misinformation and re anchor the media as a force for unity. Youth and the diaspora, a new national identity in the making? Amidst the ethnic polarization, Nigerian youth and diaspora communities are emerging as powerful agents of transformation. Born into a digital world and often exposed to multicultural environments, young Nigerians, especially in the diaspora, are less inclined to view politics through an ethnic lens. Instead, they prioritize economic opportunity, human rights, and government accountability. In cities like Toronto, London, Atlanta, and Berlin, Nigerian diaspora organizations have organized forums, written op eds, and lobbied Nigerian missions abroad to demand more inclusive governance. The Nigerian Youth and Diaspora Forum, NYDF, for instance, recently published a white paper titled Beyond Tribe: Governance in a 21st Century Nigeria, calling for a constitutional review and national conference on inclusion. Back home, young Nigerians are also pushing boundaries. Movements like Fix Politics, We Too Gita, and Follow the Money have shifted discourse away from tribal identity to policy advocacy. The Kamer Ensar's protests of 2020, while initially focused on police brutality, laid the groundwork for youth engagement and democratic accountability. That spirit persists in online debates about Tinubu's appointments and governance style. However, this generational shift faces resistance from entrenched political structures that benefit from ethnic polarization. According to a 2025 survey by NOI Polls, 71% of Nigerians under 30 believe that appointments should be based on competence and regional balance, while only 41% of respondents above 55 agreed. The key challenge now is to translate youth and diaspora activism into institutional power through voter registration, electoral reform, and meaningful inclusion in party structures. If Nigeria's next generation can break the ethnic ceiling, a civic and issue based political identity could gradually displace the current ethno-political order. Toward a new social contract, is constitutional reform the answer? Many of the problems plaguing Nigeria's national unity stem not from the absence of law, but from the inadequacy of the current constitutional framework to enforce the spirit of equity and federalism. Nigeria's 1999 constitution, largely a product of military decree, contains ambiguous language around federal character, leaving room for political manipulation. There is growing consensus among legal scholars, civil society leaders, and even former heads of state that constitutional reform may be the only path forward. Calls for a National Dialogue Conference 2.0, building on the 2014 National Conference recommendations, are gaining momentum. Key proposals for inclusion in such a reform agenda include 1. Rotational presidency codification. Instead of remaining an informal agreement, zoning arrangements could be enshrined in law to guarantee fair power rotation across the 6 geopolitical zones. 2. Institutional recalibration, empowering the Federal Character Commission and creating regional equity tribunals with the authority to audit and challenge discriminatory appointments. 3. Fiscal federalism, restructuring revenue allocation and taxation to grant states greater autonomy while maintaining national cohesion. 4. Security sector reform, mandating a regional spread in military and paramilitary top brass, subject to Senate confirmation and independent vetting. 5. Public service diversity metrics, requiring all federal agencies to publish annual reports on gender, regional, and ethnic representation across ranks. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo, in a widely circulated 2025 lecture at the University of Ibadan, emphasized, "We must design a federation where every Nigerian sees their reflection in the mirror of power. Otherwise, we risk another cycle of instability." Legal and legislative pathways, enforcing federal character with teeth. The concept of federal character, though foundational in Nigeria's constitution, suffers from weak enforceability and ambiguous interpretation. Section 14.3 of the 1999 Constitution mandates inclusiveness in federal appointments, but there is no specified penalty for violations, no independent review mechanism, and no judicial precedent strong enough to act as a deterrent. To address this structural weakness, several legal and legislative pathways can be explored. 1. Strengthening the Federal Character Commission, FCC. Currently, the FCC functions more as an advisory body than a regulatory authority. Although it is tasked with monitoring compliance, it lacks the power to nullify appointments or prosecute violators. A constitutional amendment could elevate the FCC's legal status to that of an independent regulatory commission, require that the FCC certifies all key federal appointments before confirmation, allow the commission to petition the judiciary to nullify appointments that clearly violate regional balance. 2. Judicial review and public interest litigation. While Nigeria's courts have occasionally ruled in favor of inclusiveness, such as the 2020 High Court judgment mandating gender balance in ministerial appointments, they have largely remained passive on federal character enforcement. Legal advocacy organizations like SERAP, Falana and Falana Chambers, and Access to Justice must expand the use of strategic litigation to challenge patterns of ethnically skewed governance. The National Assembly also has a critical role. The Senate confirmation process, which currently approves appointments, can be empowered with equity review hearings to assess the demographic profile of nominees, mandatory disclosure of appointees' regional and ethnic identities, constitutionally grounded veto authority when appointments contradict federal character obligations. These changes would create an institutional firewall against the unchecked accumulation of power by any one group and provide a legal remedy for marginalized constituencies. Regional interpretations of fairness, a multi-zonal paradox. One of the core challenges in implementing equitable federal governance is the varying definitions of fairness across Nigeria's 6 geopolitical zones. Each region perceives fairness through a historical, cultural, and political lens shaped by its unique experiences with the federal system. Northwest and Northeast, equity through proportionality. Home to the Hausa Fulani majority, these regions argue for proportional representation based on population. Given their numerical strength, political leaders often claim that fairness means more appointments and federal projects relative to smaller zones. Historically, Northern dominance in the civil service and military was justified by this logic. However, critics argue that such reasoning disregards the spirit of inclusion and creates a perception of majoritarian entitlement. Southeast, equity through redress. The Igbo-speaking Southeast, having experienced political marginalization since the Biafran War 1967-1970, views fairness as restorative justice. With no president from the region since independence, calls for zoning the 2027 presidency to the Southeast have intensified. In this context, equity means affirmative action, intentionally correcting decades of underrepresentation through targeted appointments, infrastructure investment, and constitutional guarantees of access. Southwest, equity through merit. The Southwest, now dominating federal appointments under President Tinubu, frequently invokes meritocracy as the defining principle of fairness. The argument is that competence should not be sacrificed for ethnic balancing, especially if it slows development. However, this view often ignores the structural privileges and elite networks that favor candidates from the region, particularly Lagos and Ogun states. Critics accuse the Southwest elite of weaponizing meritocracy to entrench political dominance. South-South and North-Central, equity through inclusion. These regions demand visibility and participation rather than dominance. For the oil-rich South-South, fairness means revenue control and environmental justice, not just appointments. For the ethnically diverse North Central, it means equitable integration into federal programs and representation at the national table. Understanding and reconciling these varied interpretations of fairness is essential to constructing a shared national identity. Without this, any attempt at reform may be perceived as biased or inadequate by at least one zone. The role of religious and traditional institutions, custodians of unity. In a multi-ethnic, multi-faith country like Nigeria, political legitimacy is not derived from state institutions alone. Religious and traditional leaders command deep loyalty, and their influence over public sentiment is often greater than that of elected officials. Religious leaders, moral voices or political tools. Religious bodies such as the Christian Association of Nigeria, CAN, and the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, NSCIA, have historically played a stabilizing role during national crises. During the 2015 transition from President Jonathan to Buhari, interfaith dialogue helped prevent electoral violence. However, their current role in the federal character debate has been muted. While individual clerics have spoken out, the institutional response has been cautiously diplomatic, possibly due to fears of politicization. To regain moral authority, religious leaders must issue joint communiques urging the president to uphold the principle of inclusion and facilitate public discourse that transcends ethnic lines. Nigeria's interfaith councils could organize national peace summits, advocating for both unity and justice. Traditional rulers, silent influencers, or passive bystanders. Traditional institutions, from the Obas in the southwest to the emirs of the north and the Obis in the southeast, are revered custodians of culture and influence. Though constitutionally without executive power, many traditional rulers maintain close ties to political elites. In the past, figures like the Sultan of Sokoto and the Uni of Ife have mediated between communities and government, offering neutral spaces for dialogue. However, the current silence of most traditional rulers on the issue of federal appointments suggests either political compromise or fear of backlash. Their involvement is crucial now more than ever. With rising ethno-political tensions, traditional leaders can offer culturally rooted platforms for reconciliation, dialogue, and collective vision building. Restructuring Nigeria, beyond appointments, toward true federalism. As ethnic tension continues to simmer over federal appointments, an even more critical issue looms in the background: the urgent need for political restructuring. Nigeria's current system, heavily centralized despite being called a federation, is no longer fit for a nation so large, diverse, and complex. Lessons from the First Republic and the Aburi Accord, Nigeria's First Republic, 1960-1966, operated under a regional system that gave the northern, western, and eastern regions considerable autonomy. Each had its own constitution, civil service, and economy. While imperfect, this model allowed for localized development and self-determination, reducing the pressure on the center. The Aburi Accord of 1967, negotiated between federal and eastern region leaders, sought to restore this autonomy in response to rising tensions. Though never implemented, leading to the Biafran War, it remains a powerful historical symbol of what inclusive negotiation can achieve. Revisiting these precedents can inspire modern-day solutions. Rather than break Nigeria apart, a well-managed restructuring, backed by referenda, a constitutional review, and a participatory process, could decentralize power, reduce ethnic competition for federal posts, and enhance local governance. A practical restructuring roadmap might include 1. Creation of zonal councils to oversee development, policing, and public service within each geopolitical zone. 2. Fiscal federalism, where regions retain a larger share of their internally generated revenue. 3. Power devolution from Abuja to state and regional authorities in critical areas like healthcare, education, and transportation. 4. National dialogue led by independent mediators, involving representatives from every ethnic group, religious institution, and civil society bloc. Such measures could make Nigeria's unity functional rather than forced, anchored in consensus, equality, and mutual respect, not just rhetoric. Advice to African leaders. The Nigerian experience offers a powerful case study for the entire African continent. Across Africa, from Ethiopia to Cameroon, Democratic Republic of Congo to South Sudan, the challenge of managing ethnic diversity within artificial colonial borders is an ongoing dilemma. African leaders must recognize that diversity is not a weakness, but a strength, if managed with fairness, transparency, and institutional integrity. Here are 5 guiding principles drawn from the Nigerian case that African leaders should embrace. 1. Institutionalize inclusion. Relying on informal conventions is dangerous. Use laws and constitutions to mandate diversity in appointments and public service. 2. Prioritize merit and representation together. The best systems do not sacrifice competence for equity. They design equity-based meritocracy. 3. Strengthen independent institutions. Let federal character commissions, ombudsman offices, and constitutional courts operate independently, free from executive interference. 4. Promote civic nationalism. Through education and media, emphasize a shared national identity over ethnic identities. 5. Engage youth and women. The future lies with young people. Bring them into governance early and allow them to reshape outdated ethnic paradigms. Summary of key messages. This video has critically explored whether Nigeria's ethnic balancing tradition is under threat under President Bola Tinubu's administration, and what the broader implications are for national unity and governance across Africa. Key takeaways include Nigeria's long-standing tradition of informal ethnic balancing in top federal roles is being challenged by an unprecedented concentration of power in the hands of one ethnic group under Tinubu. While the president and his aides argue that appointments are fair and merit-based, public perception, especially in the north and southeast, is one of exclusion and favoritism. Comparisons with previous administrations and other African democracies reveal that inclusion is both a moral imperative and a pragmatic necessity in pluralistic states. Youth and diaspora voices are demanding a post-ethnic Nigeria, while traditional and religious leaders have a unique opportunity to mediate national dialogue. Structural reforms, particularly in constitutional law, federalism, and institutional accountability, are urgently needed to create a more inclusive and equitable system of governance. In the final analysis, leadership is about building a country where every citizen sees their reflection in the architecture of the state, not just in names and faces, but in policies, protections, and opportunities. Nigeria and Africa must rise to that calling. Thank you for watching The Bold African Voice, BAV. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below. We want to hear your voice. Click the notification bell so you never miss an episode where Africa's story is told by Africans for Africans. Until next time, stay bold, stay informed, and let Africa speak.